Good evening, everyone. We will begin in 1 minute. Again, we'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. If the remaining folks wouldn't mind finding a seat, that would be fantastic. All right, again, good evening, and thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm Robert Fraser, Superintendent of Schools, and sincerely, we really appreciate you coming out this evening to engage in what can only be considered very important and very difficult conversations. The redistricting of students is a tremendously difficult thing. First and foremost, for the students who attend our schools, and certainly also for our Council Rock families. This is not something that we don't understand. We get it. Please know that we get it. And in fact, what I would tell you is that our redistricting committee has absolutely agonized throughout the entirety of this process over the past year, principally because of their care and their concern for the children of our Council Rock community. And I do want to thank our committee. They have worked awfully hard over the past year to get us to this particular point in time. And I will also thank our committee for the work that they are going to continue to do. They are eager to hear your feedback this evening. I am eager to hear your feedback this evening, and we certainly look forward to that. So a natural question, and I'll be quick on this, is why is redistricting taking place? Well, the first note around that item is that it's been just about 20 years since the last comprehensive redistricting in the school district, which is a pretty long time to go between comprehensive redistrictings. And what naturally happens over a couple decade period of time is that you have population fluctuations in different communities within our 72 square miles. So you swell in population here, you shrink over there, and that just happens over a 2-decade period of time. And then how that manifests in our schools is that some school populations increase, some decrease, and you end up, as we are today, with a school like Hillcrest operating as students come in tomorrow morning at 97% capacity, which is just way too high. And then we have 3 or 4 other elementary schools that are in the low 70s. So this imbalance is something that needs to be corrected. It's something that will be corrected throughout this process. The other piece, of course, and I think you know, is at the secondary level. The district made a commitment a few years ago to have equalized enrollments at both of our middle schools and both of our high schools. And as you also know, we now have 2 phenomenal middle schools of equalized capacity. Both middle schools have 980 students, can serve 980 students. And again, when school opens tomorrow morning and our students walk in, Holland Middle School will function at 99% capacity, while Newtown Middle School functions at 79% capacity. So this kind of differential just isn't healthy from a school standpoint, and that's sort of something, not even mentioning the benefits of having equalized enrollments in terms of opportunities for students within the academic arena as well as the extracurricular arena. To our redistricting at crsd.org website. I'm one of the people that receives those emails. And I'll be honest with you that I've been pretty compelled by some of what's been written. There's a lot there to think about, a lot of credible things to think about. And I know that our committee will be looking at some of those ideas that have been sent in. Tonight, you will have an opportunity to engage directly with committee members. Most of them are here. They'll be down in the cafeteria where we have the map set up, so you'll be able to have some one-on-one or small group conversations with them. But the most important thing, and I cannot emphasize this enough, and it'll be emphasized again later, is that we have an online survey that's opening this evening and will stay online for the next week, so that even people who can't be here tonight can participate in it. That is the official feedback that goes to the committee. So please take the time to complete that survey. You don't need to do it tonight, although you can do it this evening if you have a mobile device with you. But it's critically important that you submit, even if you've already submitted information some other way, to complete that survey. The committee will obviously be meeting again. It will be a work session when they meet again. And the final committee recommendation to the school board will be made to the school board at the board's regular November board meeting. That's on November 15th. So nothing is finalized until we get to that date and that presentation is made to the board that evening. And then the actual board vote, which the board vote is what dictates what ultimately happens, will be at a special board meeting on December the 13th. So that's sort of the timeline that we're working with and the process that we're working with. And again, tonight is just a point in time in this process. It's a very important part of the process because we have to hear the feedback from what you all have to say. Now, the committee itself consists of 38 members. It's 3 building principals, 5 central office administrators. I'm one of them. The other 2 are Mr. Barry Desco, Director of K-12 Education, Dr. Susan Elliott, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. The reason why I point them out is because they are the co-chairs of this committee. And I certainly appreciate everything that they have done as well. Have any committee members impacted by this current redistricting plan? The answer is yes. A total of 5 out of the 30 are impacted, which if you do the math equates to 17%, which is about the same number, the same percentage of students that are moving under this plan as well. So I just want you to know that. And one assurance that I want to make to you is this. Some students will be redistricted for the reasons that I discussed earlier. It may or may not end up looking exactly like we have it proposed here this evening, but some students will be redistricted from one school to another school. The promise that I want to make, the assurance that I want to make on behalf of our administrative team and the teachers in the school district is that the students who are being redistricted and the families who are being redistricted will absolutely be at the forefront of our thinking from a transition standpoint. How do you integrate into a new school? How do you feel comfortable with that school? How do you feel comfortable with the adults and the other students in that school? What does that look like? I assure you that we will be very, very intentional about that process, not only for the children who attend our schools and are being redistricted, but for parents as well. Now, lastly, from me, before I turn this over, as I'm sure you know, we started working with a new demographer several months ago, Proper GIS, McKibben Demographics. They have been an absolute pleasure to work with. They have worked with a number of school districts across the country. You may have seen a few months ago that we had Dr. Jerry McKibben at one of our school board meetings to present the enrollment forecast to the community and to the board. And tonight we have the other half of the equation. We have Mr. Matthew Cropper here, who works on the GIS side, which is their mapping technology. Mr. Cropper is the one who worked with the committee at its most recent meeting and will also be working with the committee at its next meeting, which is on October 23rd. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Matthew Cropper.
Thank you, Dr. Fraser, and thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I wanted to start off with just a little bit about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting and McKibben Demographic Research. We are based out of Columbus, Ohio, but McKibben Demographics is actually out of Rock Hill, South Carolina. But we specialize in K-12 planning. We do this kind of work for school districts all across the country. We do population and enrollment forecasting and demographic studies, and we do a lot of facility planning, and we help school districts work through school redistricting. It's not an easy task, but it's something that we have done in districts all over the United States. We work with districts everywhere from 2,000 to 200,000 students and going through issues and trying to resolve redistricting plans like this one. We've done a lot of work in the Pennsylvania area, mainly with K-12 districts across the country, but we also do work with the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights, and help them on began this process with a demographic study, and his demographic study results are posted on the district's webpage as well. He's one of the best in the business in small area forecasting, and so he's part of the team as well. Tonight's purpose is for you to learn how the community-based redistricting process has been working and give you a progress report on what they have done to date. We want you to review the draft redistricting option that's being considered by the committee. So as Dr. Fraser said, that we have maps out in the cafeteria. After this presentation is over, we're going to invite everybody to go to the maps and talk around the maps with myself and committee members and staff as well. But the most important thing that we'd like you to do for tonight and for the next week is to complete an online survey, a questionnaire that asks you questions about the redistricting. And you'll notice that the survey is framed or structured so that we're getting feedback from you as it relates to the redistricting criteria. And I'll talk about those criteria here in a minute, but it's most important to provide for you as members of the public to know that this committee and consultants and the staff are focused on a set of criteria and guidelines and looking at setting aside emotion from this process and focusing on statistics and data and making sure that this process and the resulting recommendation is a data-driven recommendation and not driven by emotion, because emotion is certainly natural when you start working through moving attendance boundary lines. But we are here because the school consolidation discussion topic has been going on for several years. Wrightstown was converted to a K4, and now it's going back to a K6. So right now, the 5th and 6th graders aren't going to school at Wrightstown, and part of this process is to get those kids to realign zones to get kids back into that building so that that can serve K6 population just like the other buildings. Consolidation from 3 to 2 middle schools occurred with equal capacity, so we are also evaluating your middle school boundaries and making sure that those have equitable space in them. And redistricting is a necessary part of this process to try to balance out enrollment and address utilization imbalances. As Dr. Fraser said, you have some schools that are on the high side of utilization and some are on the low side. So our intent here and the objective of this is to try to balance out that utilization, not only looking at where the kids currently live in your district, but also be mindful of future demographic changes that have been forecasted and a lot of those other factors. So what rules do we follow to determine if a recommendation is viable? So I'm going to talk about the criteria. And these are basically the rules that the committee focuses on when they start looking at should we move a boundary line one way or the other. And I would encourage the public, as you're looking at these boundaries and as you're providing survey feedback, to frame your comments and your feedback as it relates to the criteria, because that's really what we are looking for. If you just say we can't stand this option, that doesn't help us as much as saying this option doesn't do as well adhering to this part of the criteria. Maybe suggest doing something different, or maybe giving us some sort of general suggestion, or frame your concerns as it relates to these criteria. So these include to balance high school populations, don't split elementary schools across feeder patterns, eliminate islands of neighborhoods or communities attending one school but not touching the rest of the attendance area. And this has been this is something that we see in criteria across the country. And I wanted to talk about this a lot because I know there's been a lot of input related to this, and I know that there are a couple of existing islands in this district. Some of the history of the islands in Council Rock School District are they were created back in the 80s and the 90s when new schools came online, or when overcrowding was pretty persistent. They were created as a method to help relieve overcrowding of a school and to balance out utilization. Back in the 80s and the 90s, you didn't have a lot of the advanced technology that we have today. And so when I work with school districts all over the U.S., it's not uncommon for me to see zones and boundary configurations that have islands. Because think about it, back 30 years ago, if you didn't have a mapping system where you could look at all the students on the map, it would be much easier to say, okay, we know that this many kids live in a subdivision here, and so we're just going to take this whole subdivision and move it to this school. And that essentially could end up creating an island where, if you're looking at the mapping now, you may be able to look at all the students and actually look at neighborhoods and communities, but be more because that adheres to trying to assign students as close to home as possible, and also having a zone that's relatively logical that you can describe verbally and not have to try to explain how there's several different communities that are disconnected that are coming into this school from outside of the main zone. So it is best practice to not have islands as part of a boundary set of boundaries, and it's a lot more than just aesthetics on the map. It does relate to proximity and transportation. Another criteria are the cross feeder patterns, moving students in the north to the south, or from the south to the north. I'm going to go to this other side so I can see the slides. Another criteria is students will attend a school that's relatively close to their address. And this kind of coincides along with the island concept as well that we were talking about, trying to eliminate the islands, trying to assign students as close to their home, if at all possible. Now there are cases and instances where we can't adhere to all of these criteria, but it's best to try your best, and this committee is focused on trying to do the best job in adhering to these, and try to only redistrict students once. The board also voted to grandfather current 7th to 11th graders in the current feeder pattern, north and south. And this is what we call grandfathering. It's stated right here. It's a policy that most school districts put in place to some degree to help further reduce the impact on students when you have to redistrict. So this is a pretty generous policy, and it basically lets any middle schooler or high schooler who's impacted to stay at their school until they finish through. And so elementary grandfathering has not been determined at this point, but the policy states the 7th through 11th grade can stay in their current feeder pattern. So the committee is made up of 38 members, people from all over the school district. There was an application process back in September. 2 parents from each school, 3 building administrators, and 1 from each level, and then 5 central office administrators. All of the original committee that was meeting back in fall and winter has come back to the table in this fall process, except for 2 new members. And so we have most of the committee is still working on this process, and they have been with us through the entire process. And committee members are going to be here tonight when we're at the maps to help answer questions and talk with you guys about concerns and things that you have. And if they're committee members, or if you're in the audience, if you could raise your hand, committee. So you could see we have committee members scattered about, and they will be scattered around the maps, and they will go and make sure that if you have any questions, to help answer questions as well as myself and staff. So a little bit about the process and the progress that the committee has made to date. There were introductory meetings in October and regular meetings beginning in November of last year. This committee, they were working with a different consultant than myself, and they had done a good majority of this work prior to me coming into this role. But in that process, as the committee was working through the process, they have analyzed over 16 conceptual models that were presented by the demographer. They provided feedback to revise conceptual models. They looked at those, made adjustments, gave input. There was a lot of back and forth and revisions and things like that occurred to evolve the maps into better adhering to the criteria. They reached consensus on the key components of the conceptual model, and they applied it to the GIS to evaluate possible boundary lines. So they took concepts and then put it into an actual, what would it look like when you start drawing the lines around streets. And then they made revisions to those boundary lines. So they have put in a numerous amount of time and hours in evaluating this and coming up with options to consider and concepts to consider for Council Rock. Consensus was reached on conceptual ideas to inform their continued work. they had determined that there definitely was a need to move students from south to the north to better balance enrollment at all levels. So you'll see when you look at the boundaries and the draft option that we're presenting to you tonight, that most of the movement is shifting things more further north, because that's where there is some more capacity and then in the south. And there's also forecasted enrollment increases in some of these southern schools. So also trying to give them some additional capacity relief with the anticipation of more students coming in there, and being more of a proactive approach, as well as addressing the students and the needs of the school today. This option, the committee feels it balances enrollment to bring each elementary school closer to the average towards that draft. And then the Council Rock School District also reviewed each school building's capacity with school administrators. So building capacity is a debate in K-12. Somebody can say, well, what's the capacity of this building? And somebody gives you a number. That number can actually vary even from how consultants sometimes calculate capacity. What the district has done over the summer is actually best practice in actually understanding how many spaces are in a school, and how many spaces could a teacher operate without compromising the quality of education they have. Teachers and principals are very resourceful people. So if they're in a building that has a lot of extra space in it, they're going to spread out, and they're going to make use of all the spaces and make use of the different space they have. Say, for instance, there's a pull-out class that you have. You pull students out for some individual instruction. If there's extra space, they may say, okay, here's a resource room for pull-out, and there's another one over here that you use for pull-out. But in reality, those spaces may be only used half the day. Where if they were to kind of be more resourceful, if they had to, they could make use of just one space to pull out students instead of having two rooms. So the district was working with these schools and talking about this. And, and I should say, on the other hand, if the school's overcrowded, principals will make use of closets and spaces that are not necessarily designed for education. And they'll take those spaces and turn them into a classroom or a pull-out room. And so it's not only the teachers spread out, but they also figure out how to make use of every space that they can make available. But the district went from building to building and met with the administrators at the building and had this conversation with them. What do you need, and is there any spaces that you're using right now that we have in our capacity that you may be able to operate a little more efficiently and make better use of your space so that you can gain some capacity? So the result of that exercise was an updated set of capacity numbers that are more functional capacity of what the building can hold without compromising the quality of education that's being delivered there. And that's where you'll see some of the capacity numbers do differ in this latest set of numbers than what was presented back in the fall of last year. So a couple of overviews on the demographic study. I won't spend too much time on this because I know you guys, there's PowerPoints and the report and all of that is online. But we did do an independent forecast. We forecasted population first. We do a population forecast, and that drives an enrollment forecast, because age structure and aging and dynamics and existing home turnover is a really big component of change in a district, much more than actual new construction in most cases. But the population drives the enrollment forecast. And we create a lot of other statistics and information to help understand and to do our demographic study. But our results do show that the forecasted increases in enrollment in the southern parts of the district, with more stability and slight decreases in northern parts of the district. And that kind of coincides with the committee's thought to move things north. It helps support some of that concept. This is just a summary table that shows the forecasted changes by building, and you can see, if you look over here, as a 10-year change, that some of them are increasing and some of them are decreasing. And so they really vary across the board in terms of percentage of increase or percentage of decrease in the population, and also be mindful that a percentage of increase also relates to the size of the school. Some schools have only 200 kids in them, so if that school goes up 20 students, that's a 10% increase, or yeah. So the number of seats, the number of students in the building, actually, I'm sorry, it goes up 20. If it goes up to, see, it goes to 207 to 250, it's a 20% increase. So a 20% increase in a 200 student building it looks much more substantial than if it were a 700 student building, and 20% of that is like 150 kids, and so 20 students versus 150. So just be mindful of the percentage of increases as you look at some of these data. And this is the total forecasted enrollment tables. This you can find on the online. I'm not going to try to decipher this right now, because I'm sure that nobody in the audience can read that. So this latest draft plan includes modifications per the most recent feedback, along with input from the committee. The committee dashed outline that gives you that shows you which areas were moved, and we're basically showing you all the data information that the committee has been looking at as they work through these options. So this is the option, the elementary option that we have presented to you tonight, and as you can see, the background color shows you the zone, and then the black and white dashed outline shows you the current zone line. So this is an area, this is Wrightstown, and this area was added to Wrightstown from Richboro, and then this area right here used to be Wrightstown, and it was sent to Sol Finestone. So you can kind of see how the current lines start to deviate from the background color, and those are the areas that had been moved. And then the middle high school option right here, we keep it. The middle and high school follow the same shape, because there's 100% feeders. But this is the area right here that was added to Newtown Middle School as part of this. And the Richboro Middle School zone line, you can see how it's shaped right here, which Richboro was discontinued. And the green area is the New Holland zone. So you could see that this portion right here was added to Holland, and this part of Richboro was added to Newtown. And these do coincide with elementary boundaries. No elementary school in this plan is split. Every elementary feeds 100% in the middle school, and then the middle schools feed into high schools entirely. And that's your high school option that we have drafted for you tonight. A little bit about the statistics you could see, and these will be on the plot maps, but we give you estimated enrollment. So this tells you how many students we anticipate estimate the new zones to have, the estimated enrollment for the building. And then we have it for middle school as well. And you can see, you can compare that to the total enrolled here. I would see, if you want to look at the side by side, you can see how they would be impacted by comparing the total enrolled to the estimated enrollment. You have the capacity here, so you see how many seats are available in the schools. And we have it for middle and high school. And then we also show the data in terms of utilization. So this is what I like, because it actually shows you the enrollment as it relates to the capacity. So how full is the building? So in this particular instance, Churchville is 71% utilized in this option. Currently it's 80%. The district average is 79.4% utilization, which is a good utilization for a good, comfortable utilization for middle schools, for elementary schools in our experience. And so you can see how the utilization differs from building to building. You're trying to make these equitable, if at all possible, but also make adjustments based on forecasted changes and where we may be seeing a growth, maybe giving a little more space, or if there's decline, we may be able to put have more students in that building, knowing that their enrollment is going to decline. And then your utilization here of your middle schools, they're both at 91%, and right at the district average. And then your high school utilization is showing right here in this option. We also, this is what we call impact tables. So this tells us how many students are impacted in this option. This is the total number of students impacted at elementary, 861, and middle school and high school. These right here are the detailed tables that help us understand how many students are moving from A to B. So this helps us see, okay, in this option, 141 students are moved from Churchville to Richboro Elementary. And we break all these down, and the total of the TAN, sum of the TAN equals the total impacted. And when we look at this, we start to identify small numbers and see if can we resolve really small numbers of students that are moving. Some places you can, and some places you can't. And the committee has focused on this and really looked at this a lot at the last meeting and made some adjustments to try to resolve. We had a few of these in here that had some really small numbers that they worked to try to resolve, to try to make sure that kids, when they're going, if they do have to move, that they have some familiar faces. So tonight is it's a gallery walk format. We will be around the maps to help to discuss these with you and talk about the options with you and listen to your concerns. Although it's important that we want to hear from you and we want to talk with you about this, we encourage you to fill out the survey, because that is what we will be collecting. It's a data collection effort. And I encourage you, anybody who couldn't make it tonight, spouses or friends or neighbors couldn't make it to the meeting tonight, tell them that this survey is going to be up for the next week, and we will be looking at that input and downloading that in about a week's time and reporting this. It's important to know that we're looking for constructive feedback in this survey. One person's comment could be stronger than 200 people's comments from one area. Because if one person gives us a comment and says, you're cutting off the end of a subdivision over here, you move this line over a little bit further, you keep this neighborhood intact. That has a lot more weight for us than if 200 people were to say, don't move focus on making any more adjustments with adhering to the overall guideline criteria. Which could be made. That is the case. And we will listen to you and continue to really appreciate the input that you've provided. They share with me as I'm reading it, and it is important, and I appreciate, and we all appreciate that. The committee will with a focus on providing a report to the school district after this process is done, and then once the draft plan has been presented to the school board, it remains draft until the school board finalizes a plan. So just know that, you know, it's draft even once it passes through the committee's recommendation and goes to the school board. Nothing's final until that school board approves a plan. So that's all we have for the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you again for coming, and we're going to invite you out to the cafeteria around maps and tables, and we'll see you out. It's just down the hallway. It's about 100 yards or less down the hallway to the right, cafeteria. Thanks again.